supply sector, we have seen a concentration of manufacturing across the world. This has had disastrous impacts. For example, we have seen that the prices of movement, the price of logistics has dramatically increased. Whether it is because the number of ships in the world are the same, but demand has increased, or whether it is because people are taking advantage, I don't know. But the point simply is we have got higher freight charges. The second is that demand is increasing across the world. We have seen demand increasing at something of the order of 20% plus, but as high as 27% in the last few years. So if we are looking at net zero targets, we see that the solar manufacturing capacity has to grow 4 to 5 times where it is today by 2030. And this means that we will need a lot of manufacturing capacity to be set up. It obviously also means that we geographically diversify this capacity so that we don't get involved with the same problems of choke points as we have in the past. This is important for us because what it tells us is that we have got options on how to avoid these kinds of interventions. The first session today focuses on global solar manufacturing policy, and the second session highlights case studies around the world. Our hope is that this dialogue would help policymakers, manufacturers, and developers create a robust solar manufacturing ecosystem within the countries where the largest demand is expected to occur. We are delighted to partner with the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, and I'm delighted that Elizabeth Press is here. Together with IRENA, we are also co-leading the Clean Energy Ministerial's work stream on solar, Transforming Solar Initiative, with the support of Australia, India, the United Arab Emirates, and the United States and the United Kingdom. We hope that this dialogue would strengthen that work stream as well. I welcome you all to join this forum and focus on advancing the concept of distributed solar energy manufacturing for the creation of a strong yet flexible supply chain that could be scaled seamlessly across the world. We look forward to a fruitful engagement with you and are delighted to have IRENA, of course, with us. We are delighted to have the Becquerel Institute, Solar Power Europe, who are with us and co-hosting this event. I now request Elizabeth Press from IRENA to deliver the keynote address. Elizabeth, all yours. And may I suggest that if you wear the earphones, you can hear Elizabeth better and you will also be able to cut out the noise.
And you could hear her in French.
Shall I just do? Okay, thank you so very much, and thank you, Ajay, for the warm welcome. It's a real pleasure to be here, and let me just go quickly through PowerPoint. Because I think this is probably really much easier to have a little bit of visual behind it if they don't compare pictures. So as Ajay mentioned already, so we have a big task in the next 7 years, and we should not forget the development challenge as well. The continent has a significant gap in access. About 600 million people are still lacking it, and renewable energy will play a huge role here. So I think we're going to be sharing this in the end. So I'm not going to go through every word on this slide. but there is a clear pathway that we need to undertake to 2030, which includes the growth of solar PV capacity from around 840 gigawatts today to about 5.2 thousand in 2030. You know, that's quite a task for all of us to consider. And just to give a little bit more detail on Ajay's point of what we have today and where we have to go. One, the concentration on manufacturing and trade is very obvious. I mean, you can see on the left side where everything is. I mean, the majority of exports and solar PV sector are in China, about 40%, and the rest of it equally divided between the European, kind of EU, US area, and the rest of the world. And that also is reflected in the related jobs, because obviously the majority of jobs go where the deployment and development exists. So there's nothing wrong with this picture. I think we needed to start somewhere, and we started with solar about 20 years ago at scale, and this is where we are today. But if we want to do 5.2 thousand, that's not going to happen like this. We have to diversify at all different levels and in all different areas, and this is where when we think about how we diversify, how we change the value chains, we need to look along the whole thing. We cannot just look at one aspect. So we're talking about the manufacturing today, but we need to understand how the whole process works in order to have a really solid national strategies, which require both the development and deployment policies, but also the industrial policies to diversify value chains, and the international cooperation strategy around this, because we will not reach where we have to be unless we are working very closely together. So we need to start talking from inputs all the way to decommissioning and looking at the circular economy in that context. So as we're talking about a specific aspect of manufacturing, let me talk about two things that are critically important for the conversation that we're having today. One is around the critical materials. I always think, a couple of years ago, it was hydrogen. That was like, you cannot open a newspaper without seeing hydrogen. It's still lingering, it's still there, but now critical materials are absolutely a top story. So in IRENA's opinion, and what we see from our analysis, they're not a showstopper, but we need to be quite careful how we move, especially in the coming years. One, we need to separate the conversation around the supply growth and supply risks, because they're two separate issues and we need to manage these risks differently. So the quality and the quantity that we need in the coming years is definitely something of a concern, but there has to be a level of acceptance to understand it will take a little while for us to actually change this reality. And to also, when you think about the medium and long term, we need to think holistically, not only about the supply, but also of innovation, how this is going to evolve, what are the requirements going to be in the long term, and eventually recycling and reuse, which is going to be playing a lot larger role in the long term. The second point, which is immensely important, is the skills in the workforce. What is it that is required in order to deliver on 5,200 gigawatts of renewables? So, and this is not only about diversification and opening new markets, it's also about developed countries. Everybody needs to pay attention, because we're coming to a critical point when we will not have a skill set to do what we need to do. So what we have done at IRENA, we looked at different value chains, trying to understand what is a requirement if you as a country want to develop a strategy around this, what makes sense for you. And we have done actually deep dives for several countries, including the UAE, Lebanon, and Jordan, to see what makes sense in their context in terms of capturing part of the value in their economies. And this is where it is supremely important to consider what you currently have and what is your comparative advantage. Not everybody should and could do everything. So this again, the point around international cooperation and the conversation, constructive conversation at this point in time is very, very important, because we have a very unique opportunity to create our common future. We can be very proactive in the way that we shape the way forward that, I'm sorry, the way forward that accounts both for requirements for energy transition, but also distributional and socioeconomic factors to make sure that we have an inclusive economy, that we, through energy transition, we actually pull people out of poverty and achieve the development goals as well. And for that, I'm going to leave you with this slide, and we keep on repeating this over and over again as an institution, because there's so much focus on deployment and integrating policies, which was very important in the beginning. But going forward, we will not be able to achieve what we need to unless we look at enabling policy, the structural change and just transition, and the holistic framework in the context of people, planet, and prosperity. And to focus a little bit on the structural side, this is when the industrial policies come into play, where countries need to decide and create these enabling frameworks for companies to come and actually put the part of the value chain in a different setting. What makes me hope is that we are having these conversations quite early on, and there is a lot of commitment and dedication. So with our colleagues from ISA, we will be working hard going forward to shed lights on opportunities and support countries in their transition to a sustainable energy future. Thank you so very much. Alex.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We really appreciate that perspective. We're delighted to be working with Irina on this very important issue. And we look forward to continuing our work as well on the Clean Energy Ministerial. And with that, I'd like to hand off to Philippe Massé, who should be online and able to present and share screen from his screen. And for those of you who are at the audience in person, if you require a translation, there is a headset, which is simultaneous translation in English, French, Spanish, and Arabic.
Hello, can you hear me? And can you see my screen?
Philippe, you're not audible.
Well, I'm unmuted, so I think it's on your side.
Philippe, are you talking? We can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm talking. I'm unmuted, so I don't know if people online on the Zoom can hear me. Can anyone on the Zoom meeting tell me if I'm
So
hearable?
the online audience can hear Philippe, but the in-person audience can't hear Philippe.
And now, does it work?
Not hearing
Alex?
online in person. He's talking, but he can't hear. Promise after this we have the panel. So if I can't start the panel and go back to the presentation, or should I choose the panel now? Okay.
Hi, Philip.
Hi.
Can you please check the interpretation channel as in English from the interpretation tab?
Interpretation tab. Where is this? Oh yeah. I should put it to English. I intend to present in French, so I guess I should put French. Is it right? Hello? Let's try. Okay, does it work now? Hello?
Okay, Philippe, if you don't mind, I can start on your presentation, given that I've seen it a few times and we're working together on it. And meanwhile, Raj is going to try and get you going, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So the International Solar Alliance, in consultation with Becquerel Institute, is working on this work on building resilient global solar supply chains. And this is the phase 1 work has now been completed. Basically, they've prepared for us a report on the same, which we're happy to share with people here. And now we're working on phase 2. So phase 2, we want to have stakeholder consultations with organizations such as those who are present today. And we really want to work specifically with countries. So we want to be talking to, Brazil and Nigeria and Ethiopia about what are your needs and how we can help set up manufacturing in countries which currently don't have a strong manufacturing presence.
Meeting शुरू हो चुकी है.
So we've done this assessment. We've looked at where the production is today and what is going to be possible in the future. Elizabeth from ARENA has presented their view. We also think a much more ambitious scenario is possible if the manufacturing, developers, and financing is all aligned. We foresee demand growing to 800 to 1,000 to even 2,000 gigawatts per year by 2030. So here is what we're calling the minimal transition, the ambitious transition, which roughly lies with the ARENA scenario, and then what we call a total transition, where if we as a globe fully commit to solar power. So as you can see, 1,900 megawatts by 2030, it's a very tall, or 1,900 gigawatts by 2030, it's a very tall order. And while we've been successful in getting to this point, we're going to need to drastically ramp up production capacity. And I think one of the key insights here is this will create space for new industry players. A lot of the market leaders today barely existed or were very small 5, 6, 7 years ago. So we definitely view there's an opportunity for new companies and new countries to enter the solar manufacturing space and be major players by 2030. And this is something ISA certainly wants to help support countries and companies with that transition. There's also a huge opportunity for components, whether it's glass, encapsulants, frames, inverters, and so there's an opportunity for different types of companies and different regions to specialize. So we've looked at the different types of incentives. I think a lot of time there's a lot of focus on the kind of the direct, what we call upstream incentives, such as grants, tax credits for factories, and we certainly think those have a role to play. But we also want to kind of discuss the different potential mechanisms countries have to promote local solar manufacturing. And one thing, again, ISA is working on very heavily is the downstream side. We want to help countries develop projects, draw on demand, have lots of tenders, which will then lead to procurement. And a lot of these other direct and indirect benefits, they're part of building kind of a larger, broader manufacturing ecosystem, whether it's lower energy prices, access to low cost financing. And this is also something, when we talk about the just transition, we do hope that developed countries can support emerging economies. So for example, with low cost financing, which is a struggle in many ISA member countries. We've analyzed these case studies, the automotive industry in North Africa, battery gigafactories in EU, the solar PV industry in Turkey, which one of our panelists will be discussing further today, and the PLI scheme in India. And I think one of the common themes is you do want to keep trade open, so have free markets that allow you to export and allow you to build your industry, allow you to import components, but at the same time, using grants and focusing on your innate competitive advantages is also important as well. We definitely see a role for a mixture of disincentives. So for example, in Turkey, where you had duties, but you also had local content requirements, you also had long-term offtake agreements, which are very, very important. And in particular, that 15-year secured off-taking was a big difference between that FIT program and a previous FIT program. Similarly in India, where you see the production link incentives, but at the same time, it's also linked to the strategy to increase their renewable production up to 500 gigawatts by 2030. So it's tough to do this in isolation. You really want to look at the manufacturing ecosystem holistically. The value chain are easier. So in particular, producing silicon is very challenging on a number of different factors. But other factors, so for example, over the modules, there tends to be less limiting constraints to developing a module manufacturing and to a certain extent cell manufacturing as well. So as part of this program, we've kind of proposed 6 main paths for countries to approach manufacturing. Starting with kind of bootstrapper, where you're looking just kind of at module manufacturing and building from there, to more mature, advanced economies, which can potentially become market leaders. And obviously, there's a role for miners as well when it comes to quartz, when it also comes to silver and aluminum and the other raw materials required for different solar components. And so again, ISA is hoping to help use this framework to help countries develop their manufacturing ecosystem as part of a broader regional and global integration. So I don't necessarily have time today because I do want to save time for our very esteemed panel to go into detail about all the different 6 pathways we recommend. But we can certainly share this report with interested parties, and we certainly want feedback on how to effectively help countries effectively develop their manufacturing ecosystem. And I think one final point, let's start today. Even if a country wants to start as a bootstrapper, maybe they start with module manufacturing, 1 gigawatt module manufacturing. That's potentially a good start to evolve and to mature into a different stage at a later date. And so with that, I did want to thank Philippe and the Becquerel team for producing this work. And now we will move on to our panel. I'm very excited. We have a group of extremely strong panelists from all around the world, sharing different perspectives. And so I would like to invite to the stage Mr. Peter Fath from RCT Solutions, Ms. Laura Van Wee Migori from the World Resources Institute, Philippe Malbranche from the International Solar Alliance, and joining virtually, we have Paulo Frankel from the IEA. And I think we'll start, firstly, a round of applause for our esteemed panelists. And I believe we'll start, I think, Paulo, you had some slides you want to share. I'm hoping the audio issue has been fixed by now. Can you go ahead and speak and see if we can hear you?
Here I am. Can you hear me correctly?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Excellent.
Okay,
you want me to try to share my slides?
Thanks, Paulo.
Okay. So I will try to keep it super short. Can you please confirm that you are looking correctly? This is the usual problem.
Please switch it to presentation mode, but
Yes, here it is.
slide in non-presentation mode.
Okay. Are you still seeing it? That's interesting. In my screen, I see the presentation mode.
Yeah, we can see that your mode. It's okay.
I see.
If you can switch it, great, but
It's
if not,
it's okay. It's okay. Let me try in another way. Sorry for that. Allora, wait a see. Let's do the screen directly, and then you see everything. But can you see it now? Is it okay? Hello?
yes, Paolo, it's working.
Excellent. Very good. I will try to, sorry for this little nuance. So the IEA published early this year, in very early July, a special report on PV supply chains. And I would like to just pick up a few selected results and make several main conclusions out of this. The first is about concentration of global solar PV supply chains in the last decade. And if you compare the situation in 2010 and 2021, and I also thank you for using our graphs in your concept note, you can see very clearly that there is a big concentration in China, and this situation is, of course, well known. Now, this concentration of supply in one single country raises some concerns in terms of long-term energy security of the clean energy transitions. And I would like to be just very clear that this would be true for any technology and any country in the world. So solar PV is not an exception. Anyway, that's just a fact, and this is in the past. Now, one aspect that I would like to emphasize, and to some extent it was also emphasized by Elizabeth, is the economic importance of this. Which is sometimes not really very much on the screen. And what one indicator that for me is very relevant is that solar PV makes a very important and sizable share of the net trade surplus in these exporting countries. So more than 6%, almost 7% of China's trade surplus, which is a huge number. And for smaller countries like Malaysia and Vietnam, of course, the share is even higher. So there is an economic meaning into this, which should absolutely not be neglected, and that I also would like to see, as it was emphasized also in some of the previous presentations, in an opportunity side. The opportunity side is linked for the role of net zero of solar PV in net zero. And Ajay told it, we need to even quadruple the markets just in this decade to be towards net zero. And in terms of PV supply chain investment, this means in our assessment at least a doubling of supply chain investment by 2030. And in terms of job creation, this is also again almost a doubling. So there is a huge opportunity side, which should be a driver for many countries in the world to go into, to be serious into developing solar PV manufacturing. But the one part that really needs to be very clear in the mind of everybody is the cost gap between the manufacturing cost in China and ASEAN with the rest of the world. And the next close to this cost is India. But then if you look at other countries like United States and Korea and Europe, the cost gap of the manufacturing per watt of PV produced increases quite significantly. And I have to say, this graph is the one of July. We are going to update this graph in our renewable market report in a month. And of course, the situation in Europe is worse because of the very high electricity prices right now. I'm saying this as a fundamental point. The question is not just about investment, but it is also about operating expenditures, and policies need to address this. So coming to my final slide, we had 5 recommendations But the most important one, which I really would like to put under the radar, is to make sure that the policies in countries de-risk and close this cost gap and de-risk investment. And since then, the good news is that we had the PLI program in India, which is really doing this. And the second is the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States, which is also providing incentives which close the gap with the cost in China. Europe has developed and presented a solar strategy in the Repower Europe package in May, but the underlying policies or the more operative details of these policies are still not detailed, and this is still, in our opinion, a major gap. I would like to stop it here, but I will be very happy to take any questions and participate more in the discussion afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Paolo. We really appreciate you sharing that perspective. And of course, we look forward to engaging with the IEA. With that, I wanted to kind of hand over to Peter. I guess the question we have for you is if you could share some of your experiences in Turkey and in India, and in particular, how replicable is this for other countries to set up solar manufacturing?
Yes, thanks a lot. First of all, I'm Peter Fahrt. I'm the owner of RCT Solutions. We are a German engineering company who is setting up multi-gigawatt factories globally. Currently, we are about 6 projects in our pipeline with a total capacity of 30 gigawatt over the full value chain. So now coming to our latest project, which you mentioned, the question is, can we do it? Is now all knowledge gone? Is it in China concentrated and we cannot do anything anymore in a short time period? And I can give you a confident, no, it's possible. We have established a 1.2, now a 2.2 gigawatt integrated factory, ingot, wafer, cell, module factory in Turkey, which is now the largest in the Western world. And it was done by Kalyon PV. It's a big Turkish construction company. And they won a Turkish government bidding, and you mentioned already the support. So it was a combined bidding, establishing an integrated factory from ingot to module, and a power plant license is given to you. A 1.3 gigawatt power plant license was given to Kalyon. And then it was a greenfield project. There was nothing. And it's and within 12 months time period after contract signature, the first products, ingot, wafer, cell modules came out of the factory. So my clear message is it's doable. We can do it in a very given time period on a gigawatt scale. Now, as this is shown, now more factories are coming now outside China, especially by the PLI scheme in India, Reliance, Adani, all, Tata, Avada, SSEL, Premier Energies, all these players are now moving into multi-gigawatt factories. So it's all these factories are 3 gigawatt cell, 3 gigawatt module, 5 gigawatt cell, 5 gigawatt module. There are metallurgical silicon, polysilicon, ingot, wafer, cell, module, glass factories. All this is coming now. It's working. The bulldozers are running. So that means our dream of a diversified supply chain globally with a strong emphasis in India. Now USA will come, Europe will come, Turkey came. So I want to give you the clear confidence it's doable. Just do it, take the shuffle, not talk, take the shuffle and work. And we will help you, of course.
Thank you so much. And I think we will have some questions perhaps later about more technical specifics, but please, I mean, part of the ISA is about convening and collaborating. So hopefully people can learn from your experiences. I did want to take a step back and take a bigger picture look, Laura. And I mean, you obviously, at WRI, Laura leads the Scaling Solar program. So I'd like to get your view on kind of how the manufacturing piece fits into kind of the broader agenda, and how you see manufacturing and deployment go hand in hand.
Wonderful. Hello. Thank you, Alex. My name is Laura Van Wee McGrory. I'm the Global Engagement Lead for Scaling Up Solar with the World Resources Institute, which is a global research, and we call ourselves a think and do tank. We work on sustainability issues globally, including climate, energy, forestry, water, lots of other things. So Alex, thank you for walking us through the report before. The report talks a lot about creating the conditions for unlocking financing, and I want to lean into that topic a little bit. As you mentioned, I think you might have mentioned tomorrow, we're going to be launching a new report called Our Solar Future, which is a roadmap for mobilizing $1 trillion for solar investment by 2030. And this is a collaboration between the International Solar Alliance, World Resources Institute, and Bloomberg Philanthropies. And this roadmap really lays out what is needed to create the conditions to scale up solar investment. But mostly focused at the project level. So, sort of later on in the solar development process, looking at utility scale solar parks, off-grid solar installations, things like that. But in that report, we talk about the biggest barriers to investment after consulting with more than 100 experts over the past year who are trying to do solar development and solar investment. And the big ones that rise to the top are, a lack of planning and enabling policies and regulations that are conducive to solar investment, and a whole range of risks that investment face, from foreign exchange risk to liquidity risk, currency convertibility, regulatory and political risks. Many of these same barriers face the supply chain as well. So there's not enough of that type of finance around, and the enabling environment is not ideal in many countries. So we heard the report talked about a whole range of actions that can be taken immediately by governments, and even more successfully if they are supported by development banks, development finance institutions, national development banks, even commercial banks, to mobilize investment in solar in all stages of the supply chain. And we heard from Alex and then also from the IEA about a number of those things: the tax exemptions and tariffs, low cost financing, subsidies, de-risking the manufacturing investment. And there are other things that can be done that we have been talking about in the roadmap that will be launched tomorrow. I think it starts with governments sending a clear and consistent signal to the market by setting very public, very visible and transparent and time-bound targets for supply chain build-out. This provides clarity, it reduces risks for potential investors and financiers by guaranteeing that there will be a market for the eventual products. Another barrier that we heard a lot about over the past year from those working in the investment field is that we're in countries where there is a lack of coordination among government agencies in terms of permitting and legal issues and contracts. It creates uncertainty and it creates delays in projects that can be prohibitive to investment. And so there is basically streamlining permitting and contracting processes can be a big help in attracting private sector investment in solar supply chain markets. One other thought is that standardizing government procurement mechanisms can help scale up purchasing. So governments can purchase raw materials and equipment from companies, from manufacturers at scale, and they can act as wholesalers to local manufacturers and distributors. And they can also manage import logistics for materials and for components to drive down unit costs and provide more predictable markets. So rather than giving a laundry list of many other things, I want to just say there are important roles in this sort of immediate country level enabling condition creation for central and national development banks, for commercial banks, for development finance institutions. There are lots of actors. I was really struck by Elizabeth's comment that you need to be thinking at two levels, which is at the country level, but also in terms of greater international cooperation. And the key is for there to be a rising recognition of this issue of supply chain and the need for attention and more resources, and then sharing of good practices on how to do it so that the public sector is leaning in to try to bring in the private sector investment. I had another point, but I think I can wait and do that another time. Yeah, okay. So one other point I wanted to make. And that is raw materials, location of factories. These are all really key issues in the supply chain, obviously. But another issue is finance of the supply chain after the equipment is manufactured. We know the solar market is about to explode. There needs to be more manufacturing. But in addition, the vendors and the wholesalers of solar equipment need to be able to buy more of the equipment, because without them, there's a weak link in the supply chain. So one recommendation that we talk about in the roadmap that we're going to do tomorrow, to launch tomorrow, is to support the development of vendor finance, which is when seller of equipment extends credit to the buyer to purchase its equipment. And this is common practice in other industries like the auto industry. You have car makers, they sell and they finance the buying of their equipment. They do this because it accelerates and increases sales, and because it's very lucrative for them to get paid interest on loans in addition to the cash they're getting for actually selling the equipment. But it has not happened in the solar industry yet to much extent at all. I think solar manufacturers are doing very well. It's been a good market, so they haven't been offering vendor finance, but with the growth that we're expecting, they might consider participating in financing it. And I just want to take the off-grid solar sector specifically. This market, as you know, we saw characterized by a few large manufacturers of panels, batteries, and other components, often in China, selling to distributors. And to date, manufacturers have not offered credit to that sector in any real way. So we know that achieving climate targets will require an enormous expansion in sales for the existing manufacturers, but progress toward that goal is limited by many things, but in part by access to finance for the distributors and the end users. So expanding this market is very much in the strategic interests of the manufacturers. So their deployment of vendor finance could represent an important addition to the financing spectrum for solar.
Thank you so much, Laura. I think these points around blended finance and international collaboration, I mean, that is obviously what ISA is all about. And in particular, the imperative for developing countries to support developed markets in developing and deploying and financing these projects. And later today at 5 p.m., we'll also be launching our solar facility, which very much links to this theme as well. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Philippe from International Solar Alliance. So last month at our General Assembly, we launched the ISA Solar Technology Report. And I'd love to get your perspective on that in terms of what do you see of the technology, and in particular, how can we ensure that technology is shared among developing countries? And of course, any other comments you might have.
Thank you, Alex, for giving me this opportunity to explain. I will start from a very basic situation that we have been listening about growth, and we were mentioned that the growth would be in the range of 4 to 5. I would insist on the fact that it's on the worst scenario. It's to me, these are pessimistic scenario. And we could expect a multiplication by 10 by the end of this decade. You know, by 2030, IEA is planning, and many institute or organization are talking about 500 or 600 gigawatt a year, but some of them are planning at least 1 terawatt a year. And in the next decade, this is going to 2 or 3 terawatt a year, which means that it's multiplication by 10, which is in front of us. So we are at the very beginning. You know, PV has been increasing over the last 4 or 5 decades. But we are still representing 1% or few percent of the energy. Even if we represent 50% of the new capacity addition. So you see, you have to put all this in relation. And in the future, most of the final energy mix should include 50% of PV globally. So it means that we have a huge growth and many countries which are still almost nothing. It's not too late to start. That's the main message. It's not too late. And it may look late with if you compare with a country like China. But you know, second word I would like to insist on is this word of diversification. And you may think of setting up, I would say, a conventional PV manufacturing plant, but there are many ways to focus on only one component or to focus on some niche markets in which you may be a leader on, you know, some specialization of PV module for agricultural application or for in developed country, you will talk about BIPV, etc., etc. So you will have plenty of new sector for which you will need specific product. And with that, I will end my speech with the need for integration. You know, you will have a lot of different products, a lot of different system and application. What is important is the final integration. You know, when you discuss about setting up this supply chain, it has to be very well integrated into the local ecosystem that was said, which mean that you have to focus on when your strengths are, whether it is on basic material or component, or if you are good at manufacturing in general, you know, equipment supplier, okay, you will focus on that. It's not mandatory to think of PV just or only. I will not minimize, you know, it's important to have manufacturing plant for silicon, for PV cells, for PV module, etc. But you could be part of this whole process only by providing glass or polymer or any you know, supporting structure, or being very you can at the end be very focused on very specialized way to fix the module or to implement a system. So there are a lot of opportunities for any existing manufacturing in any country to get involved in the PV field in general. So that would be my main recommendation so far.
Thanks so much, Philippe. I've got a couple questions for myself, for the panelists, and then we'll turn over for the audience questions as well. So I guess my first question would be for Laura and the WRI. And you know, it's doable, is what we're hearing from Peter. It's not too late to start, is what we're hearing from Philippe. What about the financing piece? Are banks and our financial institutions ready to spend the $3 billion that it takes to set up a solar manufacturing facility?
Well, that's the main question, isn't it? I think, you know, so when we talk about the need for crowding in private sector, you know, a huge amount of the finance is going to have to come from the private sector. But we've been trying to do that with solar for many, many years and many other things. And it's not, you know, it's not increasing at the rate that we know it has to if we're going to meet climate goals and net zero goals and everything. So we're at a kind of a pivot point, at a tipping point where there needs to be bigger commitment and understanding from public sector finance about what they need to do to basically solve the big barriers that we all know exist, right? That's why I was so taken with Elizabeth's note that yes, we need to be doing things at the country level, but we've been saying that for a long time. That still needs to happen, but it's not going to happen at the pace it needs to in every single country where it needs to happen, right? So there needs to be a sort of a new level of international cooperation to make that happen. And that may be, again, I'll reference the roadmap that's launching tomorrow, but we've kind of identified different areas where existing international entities could take a larger role, could take a leadership role to coordinate the information about, so information and resources, right? About what needs to happen at the country level and to create risk management facilities that are larger and regional and can do things really well and on a large scale. And I know that ISA is a leader in that. So, I mean, I guess that's my answer for that.
Thanks so much, Laura. And please, Peter, add on to that topic.
Yes, perhaps if I may add a comment on what you are saying. I mean, there are some fundamental facts which we have to keep in mind. I mean, in the next 25 years, we have the largest industrial transition in the world, changing electrical sector, changing mobility, changing industrial sector into renewable. That is a fact. And the fact comes with $1 trillion business, $1 trillion business. So if you want to step into this type of transition, then you have to look where your goods are coming from. And you have a choice. You can take the existing supply chain, which comes from China, and you have to be confident the guys are doing what you want them to do. But if you want to step in a big scale, in a multi-gigawatt scale, in setting up power plants, residential roof programs, you have to look at yourself and say, hey guys, I need manufacturing, I need modules. Without modules, I cannot do solar. So simple. I cannot join the transition. So that means if you're an equity firm, perhaps you slept over the last 25 years and now you want to become a big player in this business. It's not enough to develop projects. It's not enough. You have no modules which are according to social compliance, which are fully environment friendly, which have a good CO2 carbon footprint. If you want to have such panels, you have to invest in a factory. That's so simple. That is the logic. It's not, this industry is not working like before. Some people are making modules. I'm buying modules on the spot market. I will get a 1 giga, I will get a 2 giga. No. If you want to become a big, strong player, you have to look at manufacturing and you have to take your dollars and invest in manufacturing or invest in joint ventures or support people. That is my clear message. This is all about access to products. That's all about it.
Yes, and from a technology point of view, I would like to insist as well on the fact that, you know, we, in the developing countries, in the emerging country, we were talking about application in the watt size, kilowatt size, megawatt size, but now we are reaching the gigawatt size for the factory, and we have some continent like Africa, in which next power plant will no longer be in the range of megawatt and gigawatt, but tens of gigawatts to produce the new fossil fuel, to produce hydrogen. And this will have to come from somewhere. You can think of Morocco, South Africa, Egypt, etc. Many countries could get involved because it's going to be huge market and huge and stable market because the demand will be there. So we can see it from, you know, I talk about diversification and small product and niche market. There are also huge markets coming in.
Thanks so much, Philippe. We'll get back to you, Peter, but Paulo, I see you're taking notes, and I was, you know, we talk about this. If is it just financing? If we get the financing and we hire Peter from RCT to go build this, is that it? We can do this in any country in the world, or what are the other barriers that countries are facing to developing domestic solar manufacturing? But if you have other notes, please do share those as well.
Alors, I would make 3 points. The first is that I really agree and would like to reinforce from my side the message this is doable. It's very good to have the Turkish example and someone who says we did it. It's not just theory, but it's also really happening. Can you hear me correctly? Okay, good. So this is doable. I would like also to add one other point that Philippe mentioned hydrogen. And I would like to emphasize that the financing quantity of these investments in PV manufacturing capacities are much less than the huge financing needs that we will need on hydrogen if countries are serious with their targets. So basically, we could look at industrial clusters as possible preferential zones where to include solar PV manufacturing with the hydrogen economy. This is number one. Second point, on the other point of Philippe on the opportunity side. So what is the size of the pie? Philippe, I hear you when you say that other scenarios have a multiplication of a factor 10 by 2030. And I do not exclude it by principle, but I would underline two things. From a supply side perspective, I think there's no problem. When we are observing now this new uptake of manufacturing in the United States, in India, hopefully in Europe, we know very well, and you know better than anyone else, that this China is accelerating even further. So there is no supply chain crunch. I don't see anything of this kind. The barriers are somewhere else though, because if solar PV is used directly, it's system integration, and the necessary progress with electricity grids or even demand-side response or storage is not going at the same pace. And we have to be honest on this. You mentioned hydrogen. Hydrogen will be a massive driver for new PV and new PV and wind, but at the same time, the infrastructure needed for hydrogen in terms of transport and storage is a major bottleneck. So this is why we are a little bit more conservative for 2030. I would agree on 2040. Having said so, even a factor 4 and 5, for me, it's far enough to make the case for diversification of manufacturing in the US, in Europe, everywhere. It's only a question of competition with China. And then I come to my main point. The main point is the recognition that the clean energy transition needs a mix of energy policies and industrial policies with a clear industrial targets and not just energy targets. And here, I think there is a big difference. The Inflation Reduction Act and the PLI in India have fully recognized this. Europe is still not fully there. We have the solar strategy, there is our ambitious targets, but real concrete policies to really underpin this with real money, real investments is still not there. And I hope it is coming soon. Otherwise, I fear that in a couple of years, Europe will not only face the competition of China on solar manufacturing, but a very fierceful competition from the United States and from India and maybe even other countries. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Paolo, for those comments. Before I turn it off over to the audience for questions, did any of the remaining panelists want to, Peter, did you want to comment on this, or we should go to audience questions? Go ahead.
Perhaps I just want to make one more comment. So what is needed to make solar panels? It's natural resources, it's quartz, and we need energy. And energy, which energy we need? We need solar electricity, which is plannable, because often we hear the argument we don't have cheap electricity, we don't have the minerals. No, we just need quartz, which is everywhere. We need solar electricity, which is everywhere. And we need people. And this is exactly what we want. We want to give good jobs. We are in the transition. What are we telling the cold worker? What are we telling the industrial worker who are in the transition? We'll say, we will give you a new job in the solar industry. And that is exactly what we want. We need people, we need minerals, quartz everywhere, and we need solar electricity. And then we are CO2 neutral. That's all the ingredients of a solar industry. That is fantastic. Let us do it.
Thanks so much, Peter, and thanks so much to all the panelists. We do have some time now. I'd like to turn over to the audience. Dr. Mathur, why don't you go first?
Thank you. Peter, I had a question. You had mentioned about future capacity in India, the US, and EU. Why these three geographies? Why not some others?
Of course, that is a very, very good question. I mean, mostly you can say currently because the people feel a little bit fierce about the competition from China. So that government gives incentives and they gives a certain comfort to people to invest in solar. They're getting more brave. And when you have a government who is willing to give support you, that means the country is behind solar electricity about this transition. And it gives you the comfort and the confidence to do it yourself. So IRA in USA, we have PLI in India. China, of course, has a big support scheme over the last 20 years. But I would say even if you are at another place where your government want to see solar moving, perhaps they don't have the deep pockets, then just start with a module factory. Just produce modules and buy the cells from outside. So it's not, you don't have to be a multi-gigawatt player. You don't need 100 millions of dollars. You can start also step by step in countries, developing countries, and that would also be my call. Solar should move to Africa. You should not buy the modules from Europe. You should not buy the modules from India. You should produce yourself. So, and then just set up a 1 gigawatt module factory and you can start it. You can start your industry and you see it's growing and you continue.
Thank you very much. All the panelists, I think, right from Paulo to Peter, Philip, and Laura, I think excellent. I mean, I learned a lot. My name is Vimal Mahendru. I'm Special Envoy of IEC, International Electrotechnical Commission, and Chair of the Standards Board. My question to all of you is, I'm curious that none of you spoke of international consensus standards. Whereas I come from a standpoint that that's one of the best ways to de-risk investment, especially in evolving markets. Any thoughts? Thank you.
Maybe I can start. As the PV module is a key component of all our application, standards are already existing. But what is important is installation and integration. And then you cannot have standard, you can have guidelines for setting up, for designing, for setting up, for operating, but it cannot be really standard. This has to be guidelines for using it. You can have standards regarding interoperability. This is very important. Certainly, but it's a lot about designing the whole system. And this, you know very well, but when it's a huge, we are talking mainly about a system of systems, because you will have PV and the EV charging station and many things to be integrated. So I would say for the component level, it's already existing. We have to work a little bit on improving the interoperability of all this. And then it's a lot about guidelines, sharing best practices.
Is this better? I just wanted to say I completely agree. I didn't quite get to that, but when I talked in a sort of more general terms about the need for greater international cooperation to kind of raise all the levels and to help each country do the things that they need to do without having to relearn everything that other countries have finally figured out, standardization is part of that. I agree not everything can be standardized exactly the same, but there are processes that can be standardized and sort of best practices in not only not only in sort of standards of the products, but financing standards, right? And how to do that better, as well as tracking progress and comparing, having much better databases of progress and successes.
If I can add.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Paolo.
Thank you so much. So thank you very much for this question. Indeed, I went through very quickly through the 5 recommendations of the IEA. One is on standards. And it's also important that we have standards on sustainability, which look at environmental, but also at social aspect of manufacturing, which would also address some issues that we did not speak about today. But in the longer term, this is really very important. Having said so, I think the urgency is to really address this cost gap that there is a real fact between China's manufacturing and manufacturing in other parts of the world. So if this is addressed by policies like in the United States or in India, then we can proceed also with the standardization part.
Thanks, Paolo. And I think something similar as part of the Clean Energy Ministerial, ISA and IRENA are working on social and environmental standards as well, which is something, Solar Power Europe, the Solar Stewardship Initiative, the NDBs are working on. So this is something, beyond technical standards, looking at a broader ecosystem of standards. We did also have a question online, which I think is interesting. China's industry policy aims at scale, whereas the EU aims at supporting innovation. And I think, I was having a conversation with some from Australia as well, where, IRENA is very good at supporting innovation, but not necessarily scale. So I think a question for the panelists would be, the question is realistically, can this change? But I would add, can we do both? Can we both invest in innovation and also invest in scale?
I mean, if I look at the last 30 years, we always were innovation driven, technology driven. So we reached a certain stage in manufacturing, and then we believe we need a super innovative new type of technology to move us ahead. And now it's changing. Since some years, we are changing our approach. It means we have to build up manufacturing. This is priority number 1. We have to build up big factories, and the technology is available. We can, of course, we can use heterojunction, we can use TOPCon, we can use PERC. That's not the game changer. And innovation will come in parallel now. It comes in addition. It reduces costs. It gives a better dissemination, a better acceptance for the people, having more beautiful modules. But it comes in parallel. And investors in manufacturing, they can have a choice now. They can choose about the cell technology. They can choose about the module technology. They can choose about the product portfolio using the innovation base what we have. So innovation has to support now, and we should go away from seeing technology, different technologies and competing technologies, and why you did invest in this type of technology, you will die if you don't go this technology. This time is over, don't do it anymore.
No, I agree. I have not much to add. That's what I was calling diversification. We have a diversification of technology itself. They have all their own interests. It's always a compromise between efficiency, durability, stability, cost, of course, etc. And then it's diversification of system, of application in many sectors. We have not been talking even about floating solar, about VIPV, vehicle integration, or there will be, it's a huge diversification in all sectors with clearly new product to be created.
I may add one word on this. First of all, thanks, Frank, for the very good question. my first comment would be to recognize that China has done not just deployment at scale, but has innovated for 20 years. And this should be explicitly said. The second, I completely agree with Peter. We need both. We need deployment at scale plus innovation. And this, I come back to my earlier point, requires a combination of energy and industrial policies, as it is now very well recognized in the United States and in India.
Thanks so much, Paolo. I don't see any more questions online. Did anybody else in the audience have any questions for the panel?
Hi, thank you so much. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the issues of mining, materials recovery, and how to incorporate like a framework of environmental justice in the clean energy transition and what that looks like for global supply chains. Thank you.
Who wants to go first?
I would say on this sustainability issue, there are many things to look at. I would say that PV is much easier because there's really no critical material. It was already said previously. We are constantly improving, which means that apart, 80%, you have to know that it's silicon or silica. It's glass and silicon, and it's more than 80%. And then you have 10 to 15% of aluminum. So there's nothing critical. And in what is becoming critical in terms of value, you have silver, you have copper, and this, each time the cost has increased, we have been innovating, decreasing the demand through many possibilities, many options, and that's a good way to reduce the demand and to make it much easier. And then second aspect is about sustainability, how to encourage this. And I would like to mention something about, it was not sufficiently addressed previously. It's about the specification you may have. You told it could be a CO2, you could try to lower the CO2 emission of the product and to make it as a specification in the auction process. Yes, you could also specify that it has to be recyclable, and a good way could be in the procurement. At the procurement stage, you can decrease a lot your future waste by just saying that you would like module to be really efficient, durable, and that you will test them. Because it's not always, lifetime is not always there, quality is not always there. We have to be careful with this large volume coming in. We have to stick to quality. You were mentioning standards. It's really important to use them. Not to maybe develop additional standards that are already quite good, but to use them well, which means that when you procure PV module, you have, when you make it at large scale, you have to do it well by commissioning your PV module, ensuring that they will last at least over the warranty period. And if you specify it well with additional tests, it could last 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. And this has to be taken into account from the standard point of view and from the sustainability point of view.
I will just say briefly, yes, mining, recycling, impacts on communities, equity, all of these are incredibly important parts of solar supply chain now, and are only going to get more important as we scale up and as we diversify. So it's going to be impacts that we need to think about in every country as these manufacturing communities spread. So it needs to be, there should be no effort, no international effort to create best practices and standardization of anything without including that. And I think there's no time to waste in developing some international consensus on those issues.
And I can just argue from the factory itself. So first of all, when we are preparing a factory, the factory now is getting in kind of a circular manufacturing. So we are reusing water, we are reusing the silicon, whatever crumb, whatever piece we have, we are remelting, we are using it again. So that is the sustainability aspect has reached solar manufacturing fully. And secondly, what you also, Philip mentioned, we are increasing the lifetime of our product. Before it was 20 years, now we are going first to 40 years. So we're doubling the lifetime of our products, which is another issue of sustainability. And then CO2 neutrality, that is a very strong issue also in our industry. So we have to use green energy, 70%, 100% to produce our solar panels, and that is possible. So sustainability aspects are fully catched by now the modern factories which are established globally. They're fully catched.
3 main points from my part, if I can. First, I agree totally with Philippe. The issue is less stringent for solar PV compared to other important technologies in the clean transitions like batteries or even electric vehicles or even wind. Second, regarding the environmental and social performance, for instance, about mining conditions, this could be covered by a sustainability standard. And I totally agree with Peter on a life cycle performance basis, even now, and even produced in a coal-dominated system, the life cycle performance of PV is very, very good compared to other technologies, and this needs to be remembered. And the third point is in the longer term, recycling will come up massively. As a joke, I tend to say you will never leave so much silver on your roof.
Thanks so much, Paulo. And we're coming just about to the end of the session. We do have time for one more question, and then we'll wrap up.
And thank you. Very quick question on the manufacturing, because we are saying that manufacturing can be diversified in several countries, because in the manufacturing business, scale of business is very, very critical. And here we are talking about manufacturing in small African countries, where the scale will be lower and the cost of production will be higher, and the cost of financing of that particular plant will have, because it will defeat the whole purpose of scaling up, particularly we're talking about can cut down the cost of production. And secondly, this small manufacturing company may not have the enormous power to source materials. They may pay at a very, very high price. So the manufacturers should not be selective in selected countries who have comparative advantage. So the other countries, they can simply import. I understand the geopolitical tensions, but we need to balance these things in certain ways. Thank you.
Well, while we're discussing that, we do have another comment from online, which I thought was interesting about the time it takes to get permits in many countries in the world, particularly Europe. And I think that is telling both on the deployment side and also the manufacturing side. If countries want to get serious about manufacturing, they need to make it easier for manufacturers to manufacture. But go ahead. Laura, did you want to respond to that question?
Thank you. Those are really, really good points. And I think my initial reaction is, yes, good points. You can't have, there's no one size fits all for every country and what is possible and what is best. for the country, for finance, for the, raw materials. And I think that even the report kind of talks about that, the different countries and what role they might play that is most beneficial for that country and for the supply chain as a whole. So I don't know, did you have any other?
I mean, what you're talking, I mean, if you talk about establishing in a country a sizable factory, what is that? That is about 500 megawatt, 1 gigawatt type of factory. And of course, you're right. We need to have, at the beginning of this factory, we need to have our supply chain established. We cannot just set up a factory and looking around where we are getting our glass, where we're getting our foils. That is, of course, sure. But we have worked on cases in North Africa. We have worked on cases in Central Africa. We have worked on cases in South Africa, where if you take care on the supply chain at the beginning of your project and the related financing, it can be a success. Don't hesitate. Don't hesitate. But it has to be considered from the very beginning. From the very beginning.
Okay, so with that, I just want to thank all our panelists. Philippe, yes. Philippe, Laura, Peter, and Paolo, and of course Elizabeth, and the Becquerel Institute, which has supported us on this work. I think, I mean, for me, the three key takeaways here: it's certainly possible, it's doable. We have the technology to do this. But it's a big challenge and requires a lot of financing, innovative approaches, and international collaboration. And both the challenge and the opportunity is huge. It's 4 to 5 times the scale required by 2030. So there's a huge opportunity for countries all over the world to get involved. And so with that, I'd like to thank all our guests, and please, we look forward to engaging further with ISA. We have another session at 3 p.m. where we'll be talking along the same topic, but specifically having country-specific examples and really deep diving into what different countries are doing. And so with that, thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
So today's manufacturing day, but we also do financing projects. Yes, sure. Sorry. Actually, I'm interested in this.